How's everyone doing? Good. All right. Well, let's get started. Can I ask for a volunteer to lead us in a prayer? Thank you, Hampton.
Let's bow. Dear Lord, Father, very kind, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this time that we can come together this evening and work and learn about your word, God. God, it may be cold and rainy and dreary outside, but it's bright and shining inside here as we get ready to go through your word. God, we ask you to be with Matt. Ask that you give him ready recollection of that which he has prepared. God, we ask that you give us attentive ears and let us learn something from this. We thank you for your word and all that it has to teach us. We pray this in your son's name. Amen. Amen.
All right. So we're going to continue on in Genesis. And I think we're making a major transition here from the last covenant partner, which was Adam. You know, we started about the covenant and creation with Adam. And then we talked about how sin entered the world in chapter 3, how sin then was proliferating in Genesis 4 and 5. And then we talked about the judgment of sin with the flood in Genesis chapter 6, 7, 8, and 9. Well, 7, 8. And then Genesis 9 was a renewing of the covenant with Noah. And then we get into Genesis chapter 10 and 11, which is really reaffirming the structure of Genesis, which is the histories, the genealogies. And there's a purpose to that. We talked about the purpose that ultimately there's a lineage of genealogies that ultimately lead to Christ. And at the end of last week, we got to Terah, who's the father of Abram. And so now we're getting to the third kind of covenant partner, which is Abram, who becomes Abraham. And so we're going to get into the generations of Terah over the next 14 or so chapters. We're going to start with the covenant instruction. Some of the key concepts that we're going to go through today. Number one, God's commands come with blessings. Number two, God is faithful despite man's unfaithfulness. And whenever I say man, I mean mankind. 3, faith that yields obedience is blessed by God. And we're going to look about how Abraham and all that the New Testament has to say about Abraham as well. And then we're going to talk about, another key concept is God's commands to be a blessing really is the start of God's redemption plan. You know, if you haven't noticed up to this point, major theme of Genesis is really about God's relationship with his creation and how that relationship was perfect, but it couldn't stay that way because of man's sin. There's a lot about sin. And then there's all these steps of trying to get back to that relationship. But this is going to be the start of what we see as God's redemption plan. All right. So let's start off by reading Genesis chapter 11, verses 27 to Genesis chapter 12, verse 3. And I'll do that. All right. All right. So as a reminder, this is following the genealogy to Terah. Verse 27. Now these are the generations of Terah. Terah fathered Abram, Nahor, and Haran fathered Lot. Haran died in the presence of his father, Terah, in the land of his kindred in Ur of the Chaldeans. And Abram and Nahor took wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife, Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah and Iscah. Now Sarai was barren, she had no child. Terah took Abraham, his son, and Lot, the son of Haran, his grandson, and Sarai, his daughter-in-law, his son's Abram's wife, and they went forth together from Ur of the Chaldeans to go into the land of Canaan. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. The days of Haran were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. Chapter 12. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you, and I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." Okay, let's pause for a moment. And so we see that Terah has 3 sons. Abram is one of them. It appears he's probably the oldest. I say that only because it's in sequence. He's the first to be mentioned. We don't know for sure. The other thing that's interesting is when Terah takes his family from to Haran, do you guys see anything interesting there? Somebody doesn't go? That's right, Nahor doesn't go. And I'm not sure why, it doesn't say. But whose son was Nahor's? What were Nahor's children? What's that? No, it says here. What's that? Milcah and Iscah. And who else? Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say? I'm sorry. So Haran dies somehow. Haran does not. I apologize. So Haran, thank you, Mark. So Haran dies. We don't know why. His children are Milcah, Iscah, and who else? Lot. That's right. I think the significance there is, for whatever reason, Haran dies, and because of that, Haran dies, and because of that, Lot is kind of taken care of by his older brother. We'll come back to that in a little bit, but that's kind of I think why Lot is part of this story. Okay, let's move on. We're going to start in the deeper discussion, Genesis chapter 12. What is the first command? So God, go ahead, Patty. Yep, go. Leave your country. So go, and he has some specific clauses to the go. Patty, you mentioned leave your country. What else? Leave your kindred, or your kin. So basically, leave your family. What else? And your father's house. Yep. So basically, leave everything behind. I think. I mean, that's the way I take that. Why is this command so difficult? That's a really good point. So let's go back to the text. So William said he didn't know where he was going. And so if you look at the text here, it says, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you." I don't know about you guys, but when I don't have a goal, I struggle to achieve anything. I think there's even a famous quote around that. But yet, God asked Abram to go. Now, it'd be hard for me to just go anywhere today, but at least I would have a car, places to stay, I think. That had to have been really tough in his day. It's also really tough just to leave everything behind. I don't know about you guys, but maybe I shouldn't do it as much, but I put a lot of faith in my family, right? Put a lot of faith in my home, trust. I put a lot of faith in, frankly, my dad, and less so now, but, when I was a kid for sure, and even as a young adult, I'd seek him out for advice. If you were Abram leaving, you wouldn't have any of that. So God was asking Abram, trust completely in me. Isn't that interesting? So this is a hard command. What is it? Go ahead, Mark.
You may get into this, but I just think it's very interesting that Terah was intending to go to Canaan, where God's going to show Abraham, but He doesn't tell him that. But it's almost like Terah was supposed to go, and he decided to hang out, and not complete his task, and I don't know that for a fact, but it's just interesting that he was going there, Abraham did go.
Yeah, it is interesting, and maybe there's more that was said between God and Abram. The text doesn't say it though, but you're right. Abram's dad, Terah, was planning on going, and they got held up in Haran. Why they got held up, I don't know. Tracy?
This discussion on life. Thinking as a woman, moving. Okay, well, where we go,
Yeah.
We don't know.
Yeah.
As a woman, I would be like, I don't think this is okay.
That's right. Go ahead.
I mean, the one thing that I think is different, though, there's no way we can understand that is, he audibly heard God's voice. So that's a different language, right, than most of us are used to, and I would like to think that if we heard God's voice audibly, we'd be like, okay, how are you gonna not?
Yeah, that's a good point. And that's a good point, Angie. I'd like to think that too. However, we actually have, I hate to hold this up because it's my phone, but our Bibles, we have God's Word. And how many people obey God's Word?
You have to seek that out, right? You actually have to take action to do that, and this is...
That's fair. That's fair. When we're a long ways away, maybe we won't ever get there, but in Exodus, children of Israel, they see all of God's mighty miracles. 10 attitude adjustment steps with Pharaoh. And then they see his mighty power dividing the Red Sea. And then they see a pillar of fire at night and a pillar of cloud by day. And guess how long it took for them to disobey God? 3 days. 3 days. They got thirsty and they're like, Not the same level of faith. I don't know what I would do in that situation. It's a good point. And I think that does make a difference. If God spoke to me directly, I'd like to believe I really, really get after it. Okay. What is the first promise tied to that first command?
A great nation of you.
I'll make a great nation. Now, what does that imply?
So I think one thing that we didn't really talk much about in the what makes it difficult is if you surmise correctly that he's the oldest, and it says leave your father's household, his entire life he would have been the heir, and all of these things in his mind, his next step is to succeed to his father's sort of possessions, right? And God's asked him to abandon that with the promise that he's going to give him something bigger and better.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And you're right. We're actually going to get to another promise here in a little bit that speaks to it. But what Jamie said is a really good point, and we hadn't talked about it yet. And that is, not only is he going off into who knows where, leaving everyone behind, but he's also leaving his comfortable kind of position in life. It'd be, I have a good job. If I just left tomorrow, it'd be tough on my family, right? But that's effectively what he's leaving. He's leaving all of his inheritance. That's a good point. And God is promising he'll be a nation, a great nation. It's interesting, just before this, in chapter 11 and chapter 10, what occurred? Okay, that's true. Let's come back to that. Well, I'll answer my own question. Chapter 10 is the formation of the nations. And after the formation, why was the formation of the nations? Because they wanted to make a great name for themselves. They wanted to be a great nation. And God, but that was on their terms, in rebellion. And so he broke them all up into the nations. That was kind of the anti-kingdom, a kingdom in rebellion. This is important because God is given a promise of a godly kingdom through Abraham. There's another thing, and you just brought it up, Angie. If you go back, let's look for it. It says that Sarai was barren. And so this promise, this blessing that God is promising, flies in the face of what Sarah understands, what Abraham understands, and frankly, we as readers understand, because she's barren. And so to become a great nation, you can have offspring. And so what's implied in this promise is not only to be a great nation, it's offspring. In later chapters, we will learn a lot more about that offspring. Okay, what is the second promise? And what does it mean?
It says you will be a blessing.
Okay, it says you will be a blessing. Or I will bless you. Now, here, going back to what Jamie was talking about, to me, I take this as physical blessings of wealth. Now, we'll read about this later, but Genesis chapter 12, verse 16, Genesis chapter 13, verse 2, Genesis 21, 22, and 24, 1 are the fulfillment of this great physical wealth. Okay. What is the third promise, and how is it connected to Babel? I guess I already answered that. So the third promise was to be that I will make you a great name. If you think about the people of Babel, how many of their names do you remember? 0. Maybe Nimrod. The text infers that that was the start of his kingdom, so maybe Nimrod. But how many others? 0. And yet they wanted to make a great name for themselves. Abraham, on the other hand, didn't ask for it, but God gives him a command, go, and there's a blessing tied to it. I will make you a great name. And do we know Abraham? Yeah, we're teaching about him today. So what was the second command? It's easy to miss this command. We go over the first command all the time. Or whenever we talk about Genesis, we usually go over the command to go. Because it's tied to Canaan, it's tied to much of the history following Exodus, the Pentateuch, all the way through Joshua. But what's the second command? Say again?
Go from your family.
Okay, let's go back to the... okay. Go to verse 2, chapter 12, verse 2. Say again?
Not that, and you shall be a blessing.
You shall be a blessing. That's
You shall
right.
be a great nation. So the command, subtly, is to procreate.
Well, his command is to go, and then he says, and I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great. but then he says, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Does anyone have a New American Standard Bible? Great. Jennifer, could you read the first 3 verses of chapter 12? I really like the New American Standard Bible because it really brings this home, the second command.
Now the Lord said to Abram, go forth from your country and from your relatives and from your father's house to the land which I will show you. And I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you, and make your name great, and so you shall be a blessing. And I will bless those who curse you, and to the one who curses you I will curse. And in all the families of the earth you shall be blessed.
Perfect. And so the second command really is be a blessing. You guys see that? Be a blessing. So what does it mean to be a blessing? Okay, to serve. Go ahead, Robert.
I'm not reading it that way. I think Abraham being a blessing is an outcome. To say that differently, God is using Abraham as a blessing, but I don't see where God is commanding Abraham to be a blessing.
Well, certainly blessings are an outcome. Those are the promises.
Sure.
So there's 5 of those, if you read those.
But you're saying, it seems like you're trying to tie Abraham being a blessing as a command. He was commanded to be a blessing by God. And I'm honestly not seeing it.
It says, and be a blessing. And be a blessing. And so the exact words are, and be a blessing. And so what I'm saying is, yes, command number 2 is be a blessing. And we'll talk about this more. So it's good that you have a critical thinking. We'll come back to this through the following chapters. Go ahead.
You shall be a blessing. It doesn't say go be a blessing. Right?
Well,
So,
it depends on the exact translation.
I was using the NASB there.
Okay.
So go for that. But it says that you shall be a blessing.
Okay.
Right? And the way I read that is God is making him a blessing to those that are around him.
Yes, that's exactly where I was going with this.
And if you look, there's all the stories. He saves the king. He saves Lot, right? He grew in wealth. He made his servants wealthy, right? And ultimately, we're blessed through Abraham.
That's right. If you look at the kind of different chapters, you just brought up some of the ways Abraham becomes an effectively intercession for people. You mentioned Lot in the king. There's also examples where he was not a blessing. We're going to get to that. He goes down to Pharaoh, and what happens to Pharaoh?
Lies about his wife.
Yeah, he lies about his, but what happens to Pharaoh and everybody there? Abraham isn't punished. A plague comes upon him. He was not a blessing. What about when he goes to Abimelech? What happens? Yeah. So good. Be skeptical. We're going to come back to this. What are the 4th and 5th promises, and what does that mean?
Curse those that curse you.
Yes. So bless those who bless you. I will bless those who bless you. I will curse those who curse you. If you synthesize that, what is he saying to Abraham? Yeah, perfect. He's going to take care of him. Now, that's a really important promise, especially going out into who knows where with people who don't know you, and you're probably fearful for your life, right? Okay, great. Now, what is the 6th promise, and what is the significance of that? All the families of the earth shall be blessed. That is a lot of pressure. I better go to the right place. What is that referring to? It's ultimately referring to Jesus. Now, we'll learn more when God gives more instructions and more clarification of what this means. But all the families of the earth shall be blessed. How do all the families or the nations of the earth, how do they need to be? What is their biggest problem? Sin. And what does sin cause? Death. And so this is tying back to the curse of Genesis chapter 3 and is the start of the antidote. The start of lifting that curse. Ultimately, the offspring, which we're going to read about here in a little bit, is a singular collective. But so it refers to his offspring, but it also refers to Christ. Any questions? Any thoughts? Great. Yep.
Kind of just thinking through Robert's point there, the impetus here, the focus here is on all of this only God could accomplish. That's the point. And to your point, it kind of crescendos here at the very end of blessing the entire world, which is totally outside of his control. That would only be in God's control. I think that kind of places a little more, again, if it's kind of a 50-50 ball on that, verse 2 of whether or not, that's talking about Abraham being a blessing or God blessing somebody through Abraham. I think the grander context of these 4 or 5 verses is, Abraham, you're going to be used as a vehicle for me to do a tremendous amount. And so that would kind of lean, I think, a little more on the side of, it's not really, Abraham's not just going around giving out, gifts and being this great, he is essentially the lightning rod to which God is going to do a tremendous thing. And so in the ESV, it says kind of the same idea, I will bless you and make your name great so that you will be a blessing. I think it's that continuation of I will do, and because I will do, here's what the effect is going to be.
Yes, so I wasn't trying to say that Abraham he would bless everybody.
Right.
Of course not.
Right.
God's going to bless everything
Right.
through Jesus Christ. But there's a covenant partner link from Adam to Noah. It should have been through Cain. It wasn't. Why? Sin. And Cain killed his brother. So the first 2 sons gone. So what does the end of chapter 4 say? Let's go there, because there's a story here. Go to the end of chapter 4 of Genesis. How does God fix Cain's sin? Seth. And what does it specifically say about Seth?
He was a replacement, right?
He was a replacement. And what does it say that he did? At that time, say again? He was in place of Abel. But at that time, people began to call upon the name of the Lord. And his name means God has appointed for me another offspring instead of Abel, for Cain killed him. So this is a connection to the covenant partners. So yes, of course, God's going to do the work here. God's going to do it. But I like what you said, Keaton, a vessel. Abraham had a choice to be a vessel or not. And so we're going to drive home this point of obedience.
He has the choice to be a blessing or not, right?
That was the point I was trying to make.
Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, all these blessings are through him. Do you guys see that? So this is a covenant that God is entering in with Abraham. What's critical, though, is that Abraham chooses to have faith that leads to obedience or not. And that was the point I'm trying to make. All right, let's move on. So let's read Genesis chapter 12, verses 4 through 9. Can somebody read that?
So Abram went, and as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old, and he departed from Haran. And Abram took Sarai his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all their possessions that they had gathered, and the people that they had gathered in Haran, and they set out to go to the land of Canaan. When they came to the land of Canaan, Abram passed through the land to the place of Shechem, to the oak of Moreh. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." So he built there an altar to the Lord, who had appeared to him. From there he moved to the hill country on the east of Bethel, and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west, and Ai on the east. And there he built an altar to the Lord, and called upon the name of the Lord. And Abram journeyed on, still going toward the Negev.
Perfect. Okay, so Abraham went, and then let's actually go through this. Was Abraham obedient to God's first command? Okay. He went immediately, right? And so as he's going along, he gets to Shechem. And by the way, Shechem is mentioned throughout the Bible. Really, all the way through Genesis. It's going to be mentioned in Joshua. In fact, the covenant is renewed. Joshua renews the covenant with his people there. It will be mentioned multiple times throughout the history of the Israelites, including in the divided kingdom. What happened immediately following his obedience?
The Lord said he would give the land to his offspring.
That's right. So specifically, God appeared to Abraham. It didn't say, he's like, here, I'm done. Instead, he gets to Shechem and God appears to him. And it says, let me see. So Abram went as the Lord had told him. Okay, what did I say? Okay, so Abram passed through the land to the place at Shechem, to the oak of Moreh. And then skipping down, then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." And so that, you're right. He says, "To your offspring I will give this land." What does that mean? Going back to the original covenant, the command to go and the blessings, he's reaffirming, effectively granting that blessing. Right? So the command was to go. The first blessing was, "I will make you a great nation." So he went. And the Lord now speaks to him, and what happens? He grants the first blessing. You guys see that? Now, does Abraham have offspring yet? No. This is, I think, a point of frustration for him and Sarah. We'll get to that later chapters. But God is here now giving him that blessing, at least in word. Maybe it hasn't materialized yet, but he promises it. Does that make sense? All right. And then it says, okay, so he built there an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him. And so the next thing that happens after God appears to him and gives him this land, Abraham worships him. He builds an altar. Now, as we go through the chapters, you'll see Abraham do this quite a bit. He builds an altar and worships God. Why do you think that's significant at this point? So God fulfilled the promise. So he fulfilled the promise, that's right. And right after he fulfills that promise, then Abraham builds a altar and worships him. What's the significance? How should we take that? How should we think about Abraham? Honorable. He's thankful. It's his way of saying thank you. Right? I don't know about you, but if I was Abraham and I was told to just go, I don't know where it's at, and I leave everything behind, I'd have a lot of anxiety, I guess. So then he's given this promise. And so to me, this is showing great gratitude. And is not our worship an act of gratitude? It's one of the acts, right? Great. What do we learn about God in this story? I heard two things. Lisa?
Faithful, that he's faithful.
Number one. So number one, God is faithful to his promises. And then somebody else said something?
Same.
Yeah. What else do we get from this? Or what else can we learn about God in this story? This is a little bit harder, but what did we start the chapter with? Or to start the lesson with? We started with a covenant. So the application for us today is God keeps his covenant. Now, even if we don't keep the covenant, God keeps his covenant. And the reason that's so important is we sing this song all the time, standing on the promises of God. It's so important because we don't see God. We are trusting in his promises and therefore living a faithful Christian life. Okay, great. What did Abraham do? Okay, I already answered that question. What does called upon the name of the Lord mean? Say again? It means obedience. It also means seeking after God. We just read it in Genesis chapter 4. Who was not seeking after God? Cain wasn't. Abel was. But when Seth came, that's when men began to call upon the name of the Lord. That phrase repeats itself quite a bit in the Old Testament and really means that they are seeking after God. You know, when Paul went to the Athenians in Acts chapter 17 on Mars Hill, what did he say? He talked about the unknown God, and he started preaching to them about ultimately leading to Jesus. But he says, God's has always wanted for men to reach for God. Well, that's what I think about when I hear this phrase, calling upon the Lord, or calling upon the Lord means. Okay, let's move on. So God's commands are for our good and often come with both explicit and implicit blessings. And God is faithful to his promises, and we can trust God with everything, including our lives. So I want to bring this home with Philippians chapter 2, verses 8 through 11. Faith that yields obedience leads to blessings. God gave a command. It was tied to blessings in the form of a covenant. Abraham obeyed that command and immediately received blessings. I don't think that's a coincidence. We're going to see this happen again at least 2 other times with Abraham. And so Philippians chapter 2, verse 8 through 11, it says, and being found in human form, he, I put in the parentheses, Christ, humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Therefore God has highly exalted him and bestowed on him the name that is above every name, so that the name of Jesus every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. Okay, let me pause. Any comments? Okay, let's read the last section. This is a longer section. Can I get a volunteer?
Now there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down to Egypt to dwell there, for the famine was severe in the land. And it came to pass, when he was close to entering Egypt, that he said to Sarai his wife, Indeed, I know that you are a woman of beautiful countenance. Therefore it will happen, when the Egyptians see you, that they will say, This is his wife, and they will kill me, but they will let you live. Please say you are my sister, that it may be well with me for your sake, and that I may live because of you. So it was, when Abram came into Egypt, that the Egyptians saw the woman, that she was very beautiful. The princes of Pharaoh also saw her and commended her to Pharaoh. And the woman was taken to Pharaoh's house. He treated Abram well for her sake. He had sheep, oxen, male donkeys, male and female servants, female donkeys, and camels. But the Lord plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. And Pharaoh called Abram and said, What is this you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say that she is my sister? I might have taken her as my wife. Now, therefore, here is your wife. Take her and go away. So Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him, and they sent him away with his wife and all that he had. Then Abram went up from Egypt, he and his wife, and all that he had, and Lot was with him, to the south. Abram was very rich in livestock, in silver, and in gold. And he went on his journey from the south as far as Bethel, to the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Ai, to the place of the altar which he had made there at first. And there Abram called on the name of the Lord. Lot also, who went with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents. Now the land was not able to support them, that they might dwell together, for their possessions were so great that they could not dwell together. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. The Canaanites and the Perizzites then dwelt in the land. So Abram said to Lot, Please let there be no strife between you and me, and between my herdsmen and your herdsmen, for we are brethren. Is not the whole land before you? Please separate from me. If you take the left, then I will go to the right. Or if you go to the right, then I will go to the left. And Lot lifted his eyes and saw all the plain of Jordan, and that it was well watered everywhere, before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as you go toward Zoar. Then Lot chose for himself all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east. And they separated from each other. Abram dwelt in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelt in the cities of the plain, and pitched his tent even as far as Sodom. But the men of Sodom were exceedingly wicked and sinful against the Lord. And the Lord said to Abram, after Lot had separated from him, Lift your eyes now and look from the place where you are, northward, southward, eastward, and westward. For all the land which you see, I will give you and your descendants forever. And I will make your descendants as the dust of the earth, so that if a man could number the dust of the earth, then your descendants would also be numbered. Arise, walk in the land through its length and its width, for I will give it to you. Then Abram moved his tent and went and dwelt by the terebinth trees of Mamre, which are in Hebron, and built an altar before the Lord.
Perfect. Thank you, Robert. That was a long section. Okay. So Abraham goes down to Egypt with his family, and he effectively tells Sarah to lie. Say, you're my sister. So what happens? Is he a blessing to Pharaoh? No. What happens to Pharaoh and all his people? Plague. Okay. Now, Pharaoh actually was pretty honorable. Somehow he knew. Doesn't say why. Maybe God talked to him, maybe he didn't. Doesn't say. But he sends Abraham away. Now, is there any blessing that comes after this? There is not. He wasn't a blessing to Abraham. I'm sorry, he wasn't a blessing to Pharaoh. In fact, he caused Pharaoh to almost sin. What was wrong about what Abraham did? He didn't trust God with his well-being. That's right. There was no trust. Even after Abraham's great faith, demonstrated earlier, and then he received a blessing, he didn't have faith here in his well-being. Had God promised to protect him? I'll bless those who bless you. I'll curse those who curse you. So on the second piece, Abraham wasn't perfect. Now, he's a man of great faith. He was accounted as righteousness. Clearly, he's a man of great faith. But he wasn't perfect. The other thing that happened here is Abraham was to bless all the nations, or to be a blessing to all the nations, right? But he wasn't here. Did he represent God well? No. Okay. Did God bless Abraham despite his unfaithfulness? He did. Pharaoh probably had the power to kill him right there. But he didn't do that, did he? So Abraham got a second chance. So he gets a second chance. They go back to between Bethel and Ai. They pitch their tents. And what happens? Say again?
They're too crowded.
Yeah, God blesses Abraham and Lot with physical wealth to the point where their herds are so big, they can't be together. And there's another test here. It doesn't say it's a test, but I really believe this is a test. There's quarrels with their herdsmen. What does Abraham do? Yeah, they get to a high area and gives Lot the first pick of the land. And what does Lot choose to do? Go ahead.
Take the best.
He takes the best and goes down into the Jordan River Valley by Sodom and Gomorrah. And what does Abraham take? Yeah, he takes all the hill country. I actually wanted to have a map here. I was tempted. Ever since I've been trying to build this curriculum, I'm scared of using copyrighted material off the internet. And so I couldn't find a map that was not copyrighted. I'll have to build my own or something, but or just pay a license. But it's all hill country. And so he took the worst and gave Lot the best. What happens right after he does this with Lot? Go back to the text. Verse 14.
Speaks to him again and says, all this is yours.
Yeah, he speaks to him again and says, look north, look south, look east, west, look everywhere. This is all yours. What do you make of that?
It's almost like he's blessing their decision. Like they made a good choice and he's acknowledging it.
Yeah, it's a really good point. God is blessing Abraham's good choices, and really he's blessing his obedient faith. And I think that's a lesson we can take away. The passage starts with a covenant. It has a command and it has blessings. Abraham receives when he is obedient. That's the point I was trying to make about being a blessing. He wasn't a blessing to Pharaoh. He was a blessing to Lot. That's the point I was trying to make. What growth do we see in Abraham? I think we just see him growing and learning different ways to be faithful. Everyone here, I think, can relate. Some areas, it's easy to be faithful. Other areas, it's hard to. Okay, so there is a really great passage in Galatians chapter 3, verse 6 through 9, that ties all this together about the righteousness that comes through faith. And it's specifically the obedient faith. I encourage you to read that, but class is over. We got to move on. I think everybody's coming up right now. So thank you, everyone.